Hey, everybody out there, John Marshall for Oncology Unscripted. You're frittering away more of your time, but we've got something that is clearly worth your effort. You know what? I have run myself 3 half marathons. I hated every one of them. I did it because I thought I was supposed to. I trained up for it, took a whole season to train up for it. I didn't hurt anything too bad, which is good. I wasn't fast, let's be clear. I was always glad to not be doing the other half of the marathon. So, why do you care about this? Well, there's been new evidence. It's been building over time, and it's been really led by and championed by a very good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Tim Cannon, where too much exercise or too much strain on the body, maybe we should rephrase that, might in fact be bad for us, and specifically around colorectal cancer. We already know the data because we've talked about it around a personal trainer improving your survival if you had colon cancer. But what about joining an ultra marathon team? Dr. Tim Cannon has something to say about that. Tim, introduce yourself and tell the gang your science.
Sure. So I'm Tim Cannon. Thank you so much for having me, John. This is a study that you cite that we've just done in the DC area on ultramarathoners. And I had seen in the course of about a year, three different ultramarathon, actually two were ultramarathoners. One was a triathlete, but they had both done dozens of those types of races and they had stage 4 cancer in their 30s. And I thought, there may be a connection here. They're all describing bleeding after they run. I had heard a lot about runners' trots or bleeding when you run long distances. And I thought I can see how there could be a mechanism that this could cause cancer if you run so much that you're, having repeated insults to your colon and bleeding. And so we decided to start a study as we opened our cancer prevention center here. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm really glad that you had an interest in this. The study was of 100 long distance runners. I would call them all extreme. They had all run at least five 26.2-mile marathons. Most of them had run ultra marathons. Many of them had run 100-mile ultra marathons. They had to be between the age of 35 and 50, not have a known familial syndrome, and not have inflammatory bowel disease. And we screened them to see if they had precancerous polyps.
And as you found, they did, and some of them had an increased risk for cancer. So fascinating work when people were doing what they thought was going to keep them out of trouble might have been getting them into trouble. And I know you and I and others have had discussions about the why of this. And you just described sort of a trauma. I was always thinking like watershed, not enough blood flow, maybe hypoxia. But there's also the other side that I'm, obsessed with, and that's microbiome, is that these ultra marathoners eat all sorts of funky stuff. They do these protein gels and they, do all sorts of things that are not your classic Mediterranean diet. If you had to put your quarter down, what do you think's the reason for it?
Yeah, we haven't proven anything quite yet, but I'm believing more and more that there is a connection here. And like you, I thought the watershed idea made the most sense to me initially. Since this came out, everyone, that is emailing me with their own ideas about it, and some of them are pretty compelling. And microbiome, I think, maybe among the most compelling. I've been reading about a difference in abundance in people who do endurance sports. There's a bacteria called Prevotella, for instance, that's in more abundance in runners and may be related, or sure there's so much we don't know about this, but that's what we're hoping to explore in part 2 is analyzing the microbiome. And then of course there's the lifestyle, things that characterize, your long distance runners, the goos, I've worried about they drink a lot of electrolyte drinks out of bottles, and maybe they have high exposure to BPA, or maybe it's the high protein diet that is, was highlighted this week in the New York Times. Who knows? It could be any of these exposures that could cause it. It's hard to know, hard to study, to isolate any one of these variables is tricky, but I think it's important to try to get to the bottom of it.
We're into prevention, right? We tell people not to smoke. We tell people to eat right. Should there be some sort of sign at the beginning of a marathon that says you're running at your own risk?
Yeah, like the Surgeon General's warning. I think I'm not sure I know enough quite to recommend that yet. And of course I want to emphasize what you did first at the beginning here is that exercise is by and large good. We have much bigger problems from there not being enough exercise. And I think we know fairly definitively that exercise reduces the risk of cancer recurrence. So I want to emphasize that from the beginning. But the question is whether there's a dose of exercise that is too much. I believe there is. I'd like to get more evidence before we start putting signs on marathons or discouraging people too much. But I can see a future where there is something like that out there.
Breakthrough work, in my opinion, Dr. Tim Cannon. Thank you so much for, I'm sure, taking out your time. When you're in the New York Times, you're much needed on the interview circuit. So it's a real honor that you've taken some time to talk with us and our audience. Dr. Tim Cannon.
No way. This one means the most to me, John. Thank you.
I love being lied to on a Wednesday. Hang in there, everybody. We'll see you next time on Oncology Unscripted.